Space also contains within itself the roots of the binding and loosing. It does act as an eternal agent of binding. Nothing can escape from it. And in some way, beneath its invisible and apparently completely flexible azonic constitution, there is something that is fixed, something that is firm beyond all firmness, strong beyond all strength, and enduring beyond all endurance. Thus space carries within it foundation, place, and in its own mysterious way, moving upon itself, it engenders time. For time is an unfolding, a moving of duration in space. And on and on and on these calculations, these reflections, these meditations go, until ultimately the ancient world regarded space as the final God, the absolute deity. Absolute because no one could find any way of discovering the finite within it. It maintained all finite things. They were parts of it, but it was totality, and the only totality. And everything that exists, when mingled with everything else that exists. These sums together can only equal space. So space is not only the place in which all things are, it is the substance from which all things come. And within it move the laws and principles by which all things are guided and directed. And in space we have great foundations, not only of energy, of time, and of duration, of extension and dimension. We have within it also the great orders of organization. Space is totally archetypal. It contains within itself an infinite diversity of patterns, for it contains every conceivable form, every conceivable structure, every conceivable radiation or pattern or design that can exist anywhere. All the different forms of flower and fauna, all these are forms which have their roots in space. Therefore space is formal also, for it contains the right of all things to have form, and it bestows form according to law. Somewhere also among these infinite diffusions of space lurk the principles of universal law and order. Here were the great patterns, not only of form and of structure, but of moral, of ethics, of all cultures and arts. All of the discoveries that man can ever make on any level or any plane must first exist somewhere in the infinite fullness of space. It was quite conceivable, therefore, that this term space had far more meaning than we give to it today. It became a symbol of the totality of life, the total and complete sufficiency of this source from which all things gain not only their right to exist, but the very elements and essences of their existence. Now this space was populated with a concatenation or order of powers. And this order of powers extended beyond any dimension that we can conceive. For just as surely as there is an infinite number of living things upon this earth, so there is an infinite number multiplied by itself of things existing in space. And in space we find the race of the giants, the race of the great divine heroes, the gods who are over worlds and over creations. And the ancients, struggling with his concepts, seeking to determine the way in which all these things operated, came upon a mysterious pattern of septenaries. Everything evolved or developed in terms of sevens. And therefore, in the very dawn of things, a septenary of powers, representing the seven primary attributes that man was able to experience concerning universal energy. These attributes, as emanations or as emergences, flowed out of space. They were the primary archetypal form generated within space. Now, by what means and under what conditions are we to assume that space, moving endlessly in its own nature and substance, should pass through alternations of objectivity and subjectivity. The ancient, observing everything else in space, assumed likewise that motion was there. Motion originated in a movement of space. Motion existed in two forms, or of two kinds: motion in suspension and motion in action. Space in its own substance was infinite motion in suspension. Space contained the potential of all movement because it possessed all direction. But this movement passed through alternate periods of action and inaction, an immense rhythm residing within space, like a cosmic pulsation. Just as the tides of the earth ebb and flow, so the tides of space are forever moving, and space is either outpouring or indrawing constantly. Space is like a breathing, the breath of Shiva. It breathes forth worlds by exhalation, and it draws them back into itself again by inhalation. Thus everything in space is either moving from the spatial energy or returning to it again, forming great arcs and resulting in a curved continuum which ultimately ends in an infinite circle. These things, therefore, these beliefs, caused the ancient to assume that at certain times and under periodic conditions, space became objective. Space moved from its own pureness into the extension of itself, remained there for a time, and then flowed back again in what the ancient Indians called the days and nights of Brahma. And in the night of Brahma, the universe, space, cosmos slept, and in the day of Brahma it came forth again into manifestation. And when it first came into manifestation, it burst forth as a radiant or glorious energy. And this glorious energy was immediately broken by space itself upon the spectrum of itself to form the great basic spectrum of 7 colors, 7 powers, 7 gods, 7 lights. So according to the ancients, when space becomes created, there comes forth from it 7 foundations, 7 immense principles of principles, dependent upon principles, 7 magnificent energies of energies, dependent upon energy. These energies are conditions of energy, and the coming forth of the 7 does not mean that space is 7 times manifested, rather that each of these manifestations is 1/7 of the potential of space, so that when they blaze forth together to their own total fullness, they reveal space. And these 7 became 7 great suns. And these 7 suns are totally invisible to the sight of man. They are 7 great centers of cosmic life. And they are so vast and so inconceivable that their bodies, the bodies of these 7 together, constitute all known and unknown space. They form a strange overlapping of circles and of planes or levels. But these 7 together extend beyond anything conceivable to man, for they have no actual boundaries except the boundaries of eternal space itself. These 7 great suns in turn gave birth out of themselves to 7, each one to 7 more suns. And these in turn burst forth and broke apart and radiated as 7 more, until this division took place 6 times, and the universe was filled with these blazing suns. And then came the 7th, and with the bursting of this 7th came forth that race which we call in astronomy universal suns. In other words, we haven't even gotten down yet to the point where astronomy can conceive or take over the procedure, because we are now dealing with the gradual filling of the parts of space set aside for creation with this tremendous race of solar beings. And at the extremity of the great process as we know it came forth the cosmic suns. And these cosmic suns each had its throne in the great diffusion of space. And each of these sovereign cosmic suns existed within the body of one of the greater orders, which in turn dwelt within one still superior to itself, until finally, by retiring upward through this tremendous cycle of manifestation, man returned ultimately again to space itself. Now these universal suns, each with its own power, created its family, broke forth into its own manifestation as cosmic suns. And these cosmic suns in turn brought forth their progeny of lights, and these became the suns of solar systems. Thus our sun is one of these, said by the ancients to be 8 degrees removed from cause, and to be therefore one of the lesser lights of the sky, one of the smaller parts. And the other great orders of suns and their cosmic systems and their universal chains and their great space organizations became symbolized to the ancients as the great field of constellations. For these constellations to the ancients were all alive. Everything in space was alive. There was no death. And these orders above us were simply races superior to our own, races of solar giants, each in turn part of some order greater than itself, until finally out of all this mystery and diffusion came the simple mystery of our own solar world. Now these suns in space, cosmic, universal, and beyond, each had its own progenies, and each produced its own kind of planets, and these had their luminaries. And within the orders of all these great systems, creatures came into existence. Creatures even whose names we know nothing about, but who were the citizens of vast orders infinitely greater than our own. Some of these orders were so great that our entire solar system would not be as large as one of the simple organisms evolving within one of the still greater ones. All of these speculations came finally down to man's concept of the solar deity. And the solar deity was therefore the direct focal point of all these other powers. And through the solar energy, all of the vast organism of chaos and cosmos were released into the consciousness or integration that formed our way, our planet, our solar system. Thus we have a kind of concept of space that is pretty big, one that is almost too large for us to contemplate. And within all of this tremendous diffusion, everything is unfolding and evolving according to law. And this law is not something imposed from without, but something which is natural to the energies themselves, by means of which this diffusion is maintained. All of these processes obey their own natures, and as each thing obeys its own nature, it becomes the law for those things less than itself, or that exist within its own nature. Thus the purpose of a thing becomes the law of its parts. And man, living within the mystery of the solar field, therefore follows the laws of the sun. He follows the geometry and psychology and astronomy of the solar world itself. Man, contemplating these things from his own earthly position, looking up therefore into the sky and unable to contemplate the totality of this mystery by rationality, divided space into 3 stratifications. That is, suitable to his own comprehension. He recognized that there were more classifications, but they were simply beyond him. But he did see in space 3 apperceivable things, 3 qualities that he could, to a degree, comprehend. And the first of these great diffusions of the firmament he called the first motion, the primum mobile, the great motion of the world. And he declared that this motion, this rhythm, this tremendous continuance of ever-flowingness represented to a great degree the life of God. But this life was a life forever in motion, both quantitative and qualitative motion, far more than anything we know.